Do you know what's the worst thing for the Russian Navy right now? That it has nowhere left to run. The Ukrainian Defense Forces struck several missile carriers and caliber missiles in the Black Sea, even though the Russians were sure they had hidden these ships from Ukrainian attacks. We are talking about Novorossiysk, where yesterday Neptune missiles and others struck the Russian naval base. Since the beginning of 2023, Ukraine has been systematically pushing the Russian Black Sea fleet out of Crimea. And as you remember, the Russians moved their ships to Novorossiysk, more than 300 kilometers from the front line, where it seemed at the time that Ukrainian weapons wouldn't be able to reach, or that Russian air defense would be able to protect it. At least that's what the Russians were hoping for. And then, on the night of August 12, it turned out a Ukrainian missile can reach there as well. During one operation, at least 3 Russian warships were damaged, which had been launching caliber missiles at Ukraine, the largest oil terminal on the Black Sea, and 2 grain terminals that handle 12% of Russia's grain exports. And literally a day later, today on August 13th, an officer of the Russian Navy was killed in Sevastopol by an explosion. That is the former commander of the only Ukrainian submarine that went over to the occupier's side after 2014. So the traitor got what was coming to him 12 years later. And that's not all, not even close. At the same time, Bashkortostan is burning thousands of kilometers away from the Black Sea. And in Orenburg, the authorities have urged residents, quote, to prepare for the worst. Because it will take at least 6 months to repair the previously damaged oil refinery in the region. And that's an official statement. Let's go through the entire report step by step in this episode and break everything down, because it seems that the tactics and strategy of Ukraine's defense forces have changed a bit. My name is Alexei Peshi, let's discuss this topic together, but before we start I ask you to subscribe to this YouTube channel, like the episode and leave any comment under this video. I would really appreciate it. Take that!
Take that, damn it! Take that, bastard!
Flew over there, bastard.
A fucking asshole, he flew right here. Fuck! Oh, fuck! Here he is! Fuck! Here he is, bitch! Fuck! Here he is! Perfect! Oh!
So let's start, of course, with Novorossiysk, because that's where the catastrophe for the Russian fleet unfolded, and it seems this is just the beginning of a new phase of the military operation by the Ukrainian Defense Forces. This was already hinted at by the acting Minister of Defense of Ukraine, Yevhen Khmara. Here is his quote. "We will disable the Russian war machine, destroy the infrastructure, the fleet and the logistics, fuel and energy infrastructure, and the enterprises supporting the war against Ukraine. Our operation in Novorossiysk was unique. The combined strike was carried out with missiles, jet drones and naval unmanned vehicles. And now Ukrainian OSINT projects have already called this attack, quote, one of the most successful attacks by Ukraine's defense forces on one of the most protected cities in Russia. The grain and fuel oil terminals were hit. Satellite images show numerous damages to grain storage facilities and transport infrastructure facilities, particularly grain elevators. But the results of the strike on the Russian Navy's main base turned out to be much more interesting. According to OSINT sources, the following ships and vessels were hit. First, the frigate Admiral Makarov with damage in the area of the caliber missile launchers, as well as the rear superstructures with missiles. Second, the frigate Admiral Essen with damage in the area of the caliber missile launchers. Next, a Project 266M minesweeper was damaged, as well as the research vessel Viktor Cherokov. There is also an as yet unidentified Project 22160 patrol ship. The Project 864 reconnaissance ship Priazovye possibly suffered damage to the stern, and one more unidentified vessel, a dry cargo ship. So, as you can see, this is quite an extensive list of ships that have been hit. Separately, a hit on the coastal infrastructure of the 4th Submarine Brigade was recorded. Plus, the Shesharis oil export terminal was also hit. The images show hits on the main docks that service large tankers. An official confirmation came from the Main Intelligence Directorate of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine. The press service of the Main Intelligence Directorate reported that on the night of August 11 to 12, in addition to the already listed ships, the infrastructure of the Grushovaya oil depot was also hit, the oil terminal of Shesharis, and a radar station that is part of the S-300 air defense system. So basically, the system that was supposed to protect this port from Ukrainian strikes itself came under a Ukrainian strike. The success of the operation was personally confirmed later by President Volodymyr Zelensky, who called it a combined operation. And here the scale is truly impressive. Finally, details have emerged about the types of weapons that were used against Novorossiysk. Next, I'll quote Zelensky. And, as they say, count on your fingers how many types of weapons were used. Quote. For the first time in a single operation, the following work together in coordination. Pulina Polyanitsa, that's the very same rocket drone, Peklo, Bars, Long Neptune, and also the drones Mich, Firepoint, Ramzai, Sichen, Trust, Harek, Baber, Luchi, Dovbush, and also the unmanned boats Sargan and Mamai. So this entire armada struck Novorossiysk, so it's no surprise that they couldn't defend against this attack at all. Zelensky called the damage to ships of the Russian fleet an important result of the operation, which were hiding in the Bay of Novorossiysk. Besides the frigates, this also includes a large landing ship, a corvette, and other vessels. Zelensky emphasized that pressure on Russia to end the war will continue. He added that the priority targets for the near future have already been determined. It is important to note that even the Russian Z channel called Military Informant confirmed the fact of hits in the area of the caliber cruise missile launchers of the frigates Admiral Essen and Admiral Makarov. And this same pro-military channel came out with a phrase that, well, excuse me, speaks for itself. Here is a quote from Military Informant. The extent of the damage is unclear, but obviously, the enemy is trying to disable the missile carriers in order to reduce the single missile salvo in case of new strikes on Ukraine, and thereby make things easier for their air defense. The big question is, where can Russia's Black Sea Fleet run now? After moving the ships from Crimea to Novorossiysk, which is now also being regularly targeted. And this is really telling because both frigates have already been hit before, and specifically in Novorossiysk. Let me remind you, on April 6th of this year, Ukrainian drones during a massive attack on the Krasnodar region had already attacked Admiral Makarov in the port of Novorossiysk. And the months before that, on March 2, that same Admiral Essen was also damaged during the attack on the city's port infrastructure. So, in other words, Novorossiysk, which was supposed to become a safe haven after the Russian fleet fled from Crimea, turned out to be no safer. And this is already the third time that the same ships have come under attack. Acting Minister of Defense of Ukraine Yevhen Khmara added that at a meeting with President Zelensky, further steps were determined thanks to which, quote, Russia will burn, I quote. Ukrainian operations will become increasingly difficult to counter. Ukrainian weapons will only become more numerous. The strikes will be more precise. We are working to fulfill the president's task of forcing Russia into a just peace. The economic consequences of the strike on Novorossiysk have already become apparent as well. In particular today. Today, August 13, Russian railways imposed restrictions on cargo transportation toward the Black Sea port of Novorossiysk. According to a document on the Russian Railways website, loading toward the Novorossiysk and Novorossiysk export stations is restricted until August 22 of this year. But, as it turned out, that was just the beginning. And I didn't put the phrase "Hunt for the Russian Navy" in this episode's thumbnail for nothing. The next day, that is today, August 13, in occupied Sevastopol, a man died as a result of an explosion on the street. At first, it was unclear who he was. The incident happened on the morning of August 13, in a park behind a residential area on Stoletovsky Avenue. Eyewitnesses say that the man was walking up the stairs with another person when the explosion happened. It was so powerful that passers-by at first thought a drone had struck the building. According to preliminary information, the explosive device was planted in a trash can under a bench. Later, information emerged that among those killed was 49-year-old officer of the Russian Navy, Robert Shagiv. And he's not just an officer. In the Russian Federation, he's considered a prime example of a traitor. He served in the Ukrainian Navy and commanded Ukraine's only submarine, Zaporizhia. After the annexation of Crimea by Russia in 2014, he joined the Russian Navy and helped the Russians seize that very Ukrainian submarine Zaporizhia. Recently, he held the position of deputy commander of the 4th Separate Submarine Brigade of the Russian Black Sea Fleet. If you were paying attention, this is the very brigade whose coastal infrastructure was hit in Novorossiysk just a day earlier. Ukraine opened a treason case against him. And according to the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, since 2022, this Shagiv has been involved in massive caliber missile strikes on civilian infrastructure in Ukraine and residential buildings. See how the picture comes together. They struck the frigates, the carriers of this caliber missiles in Novorossiysk. They struck the 4th Separate Submarine Brigade of the Russian Black Sea Fleet there in Novorossiysk as well. And literally less than a day later, they struck the officer who runs this brigade and who is in one way or another connected to those very caliber missile launches against Ukraine. I should note that this is already the second case of a high-ranking official being targeted, a Russian military officer, since the beginning of this month. Because on the evening of August 1st, there was also an explosion at the Balzi Rossi restaurant in Moscow. At first it was reported as a gas leak, however later the National Anti-Terrorism Committee stated that an explosive device went off in the establishment, which a woman tried to bring in disguised as a gift. As a result, 5 people were killed. At least 19 more were injured. The target of the attack was most likely a general. The commander-in-chief of the Russian Aerospace Forces, Alexander Chaiko, whom the Ukrainian authorities accuse of involvement in crimes in Bucha. Later in Moscow, the funerals were held for Major General Valery Plokhotnyuk and Chaiko's son-in-law Danil Peredri, who died on the same day, August 1. And Chaiko's 26-year-old daughter, Maria, received multiple shrapnel wounds and is undergoing treatment in a Moscow hospital. Now, about what happened on the same day, August 13, in occupied Sevastopol, against the backdrop of the death of the traitor Shageyev, because the city was already shaken. Sevastopol was left without electricity after a massive attack by Ukrainian drones. This was officially reported by the so-called governor appointed by Russia, Mikhail Razvazhaev, who advised residents to save their phone batteries and not overload the grid when the power is restored. However, he could not say when the electricity would be back. At night, the Balaklava thermal power plant, one of the key power stations on the peninsula, was hit, as well as a major city water facility that supplies Sevastopol with water. Residents of Crimea also reported incoming drones and the sounds of gunfire in the area of the Novorossiysk thermal power plant. Previously, Sevastopol experienced a complete power outage on July 27. And back then, the same Razvazhayev explained it as an overload of the power grids outside the city. And even earlier in July, due to a shortage of energy capacity, Sevastopol introduced a power outage schedule, under which electricity was supplied for only 6 hours a day.
There it was, 2 hours. On with 6-hour breaks in between.
Now let's move even further. Bashkortostan, which on the same day, August 13th, also came under a massive attack thousands of kilometers from the Black Sea. In the morning, Ukrainian drones attacked the city of Salavat. The Gazprom Neftekhim Salavat oil refinery was hit. By the way, the scale of the target here is impressive. This is the largest petrochemical enterprise of Gazprom, capable of processing 7.5 million tons of oil per year. If you add it all up, that's almost 3% of the total oil processing volume in all of Russia. And this is already the second strike on this refinery in a month. Before this, Ukrainian drones attacked the same oil refinery on July 14th, damaging 2 primary processing units, ABT-6 and ABT-4. At that time, the facility completely stopped its operations, and its restoration could have taken anywhere from several weeks to several months. And today, the Ukrainian Defense Forces finished it off completely, so it was already under repair. And they hit it once again to delay those repairs as much as possible. Just a couple of hours later, Ukrainian forces struck a second target in Bashkortostan, the Lantern.
Missed. Oh no! There's another one. See, they're coming from both sides. It's coming from over there.
The Wildberries Logistics Center, located on the territory of the Agropark Center for Agrotechnology in the Chishminsky district, was attacked on the morning of August 13, and a video immediately appeared online showing how in just a minute 3 drones dove onto the warehouse, which led to the explosions. The scale of the entire campaign against Wildberries is also, already quite impressive. The numbers there are telling. The armed forces of Ukraine began striking the logistics infrastructure of this company on July 18. Since then, about 20 logistics centers have been hit, including Elektrostal, Krasnodar, Nevinnomysk, Yekaterinburg, St. Petersburg. There were also fires in Crimea, and so on. At least 14 of them burned down completely. And by August 8th, the largest Russian marketplace had already lost a third of its warehouse capacity. Today, they've lost another warehouse on top of that. And the value of goods destroyed by the fires amounted by the most conservative estimates to almost 500 billion rubles. And I'll add one last detail to this summary. This is the overall picture of the fuel crisis that all these strikes fit into. Since the beginning of August, at least 4 oil refineries have stopped processing crude oil after Ukrainian attacks. These are Orskneft Orgsyntez in the Orenburg region, Zapsibneftichim in the Tyumen region, as well as the Saratov and Volgograd oil refineries. Moreover, the governor of the Orenburg region, Yevgeny Solntsev, said today that it is impossible to restore the Orsk oil refinery, which was hit by a UAV strike on August 10. The only major plant in the region, as he put it, there is currently no way to do so. At the plant, with a capacity of almost 6 million tons per year, producing about 600,000 tons of gasoline and almost 2 million tons of diesel fuel annually. Key infrastructure was damaged. And now I will give you a wonderful telling quote from the governor of the Orenburg region. He says the following. The situation there is difficult. The equipment is imported. Taking the sanctions into account, the repair period will be extended to up to 6 months. We are preparing for the worst case scenario. According to him, the region will have to rely on fuel brought in from outside the region, and priority at gas stations will be given to special vehicles. The day before, the regional authorities reinstated limits on gasoline sales, no more than 30 liters per person, and sent the police to control the lines at gas stations. Well, because Russians there are literally fighting each other to be the first to get 30 liters of gasoline. So, according to S&P Global's analysis, since the beginning of the year, attacks have disrupted the operations of at least 26 oil refineries, 7 of which had not resumed the production by the end of June. As a result of regular strikes on oil refineries, oil processing in Russia has fallen to its lowest level since May 2002. That's just over 3.5 million barrels per day. And although by the end of July the gasoline shortage situation in Russia briefly improved because they started importing from Kazakhstan, India and so on, but closer to mid-August, residents of at least 16 regions started complaining again about lines at gas stations and restrictions on gasoline sales. Well, as you can see, even importing fuel from India doesn't save the situation, and recently there was news that Russians are significantly increasing this import, and here's what that looks like. India buys cheap Russian oil and even managed to get a discount on it, processes it at its own refineries, and then sells expensive gasoline to those Russians at market price. And the Russians are happy to buy this gasoline, because, well, they have no other choice. I'll leave it at that. Share your opinions and conclusions in the comments below this episode. Friends, if you want to support the work of an independent YouTube channel, I would appreciate. You can do this by making any donation using the links and details in the description of this video, or by joining the channel here on YouTube. Under this video, click the join button and choose any option that's convenient and suitable for you. The amounts are very small, so I will be grateful for any support you can give. Subscribe to the channel, like the video and hit the bell so you don't miss any new episodes. That's all for now. Take care of yourselves. Goodbye everyone.